Hello, everybody, and welcome back to ABM Answered, the quickfire ABM Demand Generation video series, or at least that's what we aim for. I'm here with ABM extraordinaire and maestro Davis himself, who is the CEO of ForgeX, which, if I'm not mistaken, is a market research and advisory firm that specializes in ABM go-to-market strategies. So, yeah, Davis, how are you doing? Did I miss off anything from that intro? Any hidden projects you're working on? Or
No, you've got it. Couple hidden projects. We'll have to come on for another 7 questions. We could dive into those. But thanks so much for having me on today, Sam. Very excited.
awesome. All right, David. So to run you through kind of like the rules, and for the viewers, the rules again. Davis, in this case, will be given 7 questions to respond to, all about ABM and demand generation. These questions have come from or have been adapted based on the data we've collected at Mixed Reality Rims, where over 1,000 marketers have gone through an experience and stated what their biggest headaches and struggles are with demand gen and ABM at the moment. So, yeah, Davis, if you're ready to rock and roll, we'll dive straight into question one.
Let's do it.
The first challenge that came in, and this is kind of perfect, I think, for what you folks do, is the implementation of AI was the challenge. So a question, I guess, is how do you use AI personally, or how do you advise your clients to use AI in their tech stack to their advantage?
So AI is an interesting one. I think it is grossly overhyped in some capacities, as in you'll see a lot of different tech companies saying that they do AI, or it feels like everybody's coming out with a co-pilot each week. It's a bit overrated in some capacities, but then it's also underrated in others. And where I think it's underrated is that it's become such a part of everyone's day to day with a few different pieces. So the first one being copy. Everybody, or if you're not, you should be, is using a Chat GPT or maybe a Gemini for brainstorming different copy, for tweaking, maybe making a couple revisions on headlines or LinkedIn posts, blogs. Everybody's using it for the most part in that type of capacity. So copywriting is huge. Another one is account intelligence. So this more so on the ABM side. There are a few organizations who have created GPTs that can relay you back specific key points about your target account list. Maybe you're doing a one-to-one enterprise ABM motion. You're going after a Bank of America. You want to know all of the insights and how it relays and points back to your specific solution or service. And you also want to know who makes up the buying group within that subsect or that function within Bank of America that you're going after. There are GPTs that can do that right now, which is really cool. Another one is images. So we use Midjourney all the time. Personally, I found Midjourney to be a lot stronger than a Chat GPT with image generation. And we'll use that for, we've used it on our website for creative design within assets and whatnot. And that is definitely something that I think isn't used as much as it should be. And then the fourth, where we use all the time, is podcast editing. So we have Descript. And what Descript allows you to do is you can record your podcast, upload it into this platform. AI will automatically do a full translation of the episode itself. And you can program it to remove all of the ums, the ahs, and really create that seamless, nice podcast flow at scale. So instead of having to go into, I don't even know what they would use for podcast recording or editing softwares before. We've only known Descript. But instead of going in and manually taking out all of those different filler words, it does that at scale. So that's how we're using AI. Another component is data analysis. We've tested this. We've tried this. It's a bit tricky to do at scale for a lot of clients or a lot of other organizations, just given the fact that there's a lot of data privacy behind this, but that is definitely coming and is definitely here in a lot of cases.
Crikey. Okay, so I've been writing down a lot of follow-on questions. I try my best to avoid them because otherwise we could extend this for hours. I have a few questions. You might not know the answers. Just to follow on that, what's the difference between ChatGPT, for example, and like a copy, or is it like Writer or like those other equivalents that specialize in copywriting? Would be my first follow-on question.
So we've looked into Copy A and a few of those other tools, and personally, I've always gone back to ChatGPT. You can prompt it the way that you want. I think a few of and again, I haven't used them, so there are definitely people who are more experienced and well versed in them than I am. But a few of the reasons why we didn't buy them is ChatGPT can do it. You just have to prompt it really well.
Mhm.
I like the variability in a ChatGPT where it's not just copy. You can do a lot of other things in the same, string of, or I'm not sure what you'd call it, but within that same query, you can do a
Mhm.
lot of other things as well. But a copy AI, I think you'd buy that tool or another one of them because it has probably a better memory. You can prompt it, and the prompts last across multiple different other types of copy that you're using. I bet the copy is probably a little stronger. I mean, I look at those almost as a pre-programmed, pre-prompted out chat GPT where it just makes it quicker to do what you can already do.
That makes a lot of sense. So you can like program it with your brand, tone of voice, and things like that. But I suppose if you're working across a variety of different clients, that's pretty useless because you need to constantly like rewire it depending on who the target customer is. The other follow-on question specifically to that, and I'm so sorry for going on. I've got a lot of questions. Is like, do you think there's a risk of, and Noel Gallagher said this. I imagine you might know who he is, the lead singer of Oasis, or Liam Gallagher, that could be. But he was like, if everyone's doing the same thing, like ChatGPT in a way is optimizing for like the perfect copy, and this is what's working now. But then by default, if everyone's using it, everyone becomes the same. They have the same layout, have the same texture, the same kind of formatting, the same hooks. And to stand out with marketing, you need to do something differently. So, is there a risk that people are relying on it too heavily for their copy and marketing?
If you use one of the tools a lot, you can already tell who's using it in their copy just on their LinkedIn posts alone.
Yeah.
You'll see a lot of emojis. It's written in a chat GPT as tone. You'll see delve all the time, or another one is navigate. Chat
Hmm.
GPT freaking loves to use navigate. And to that point, you definitely can. Like the way we use it is more of a brainstorming tool, or uh, I'll create a headline, let's say, for example, for our newsletter or a LinkedIn post, and I think it can be a bit stronger. So I'll program ChatGPT and basically say, "Hey, I want you to create a really confrontational." That's the word that usually gets a pretty solid response, like a really confrontational and strong hook for this. And then I'll take my idea, plug it in, have ChatGPT come back with 15 others, and then I'll pull bits and pieces from those different 15 to make my original version stronger. So right now, I think, and the way we use it is more of a brainstorming tool, but I could definitely see in the future it actually being able to write, a pretty solid response, and then you just tweak the response versus you taking a first pass and then using it to tweak your first pass.
Interesting. Okay. Right. We've heavily overrun on that first question. So let's just into problem two, which was differentiating in a saturated market. So similar to what we were just talking about, really. Um, what strategies do you use to kind of like differentiate? Let's take software as an example in a crowded market, and how do you communicate its uniqueness to potential clients?
The most important part here is your product's uniqueness. You'll see a lot of different software companies when you go to their website, they say the same jargon it's the same BS, and you can't really tell what they actually do. And everybody, for example, is a GTM platform now, or they're unifying your, marketing and sales teams in our GTM platform with our data powered insights. It's like, what the hell does that actually mean? And so when it comes to actually differentiating in a saturated market, the way I look at this is you need to be talking to your customers, you need to be talking to your prospects all the time, and actually pulling out their specific pains, their specific strategic imperatives, what's going on in their day to day, and map that back to what your product actually does that's
Mhm.
unique. Why should they hire you versus this other competitor, versus you just going to your competitor, stealing their messaging, tossing it on your website with a chat GPT, maybe slight variance, and saying, hey, we do the same thing, we look just like them, you should buy us. But actually having messaging that highlights your specific uniqueness and messaging that resonates based off of talking to your customers and your prospects.
Yeah, so the with the messaging though, even if you changed your messaging based off like primary research that you've done, in theory, your competition could kind of like lift that messaging and place it on their website. They'll always be second best, always be slightly behind. But like, how are they like the one that I guess I've got in my head is like by creating a community. It's like when I worked at a mentoring platform, we built like we were a B2B software. That's how we made our money. But we had a B2C play where we built a community from 4,000 when I joined, I think, to 120, 30,000 mentors and mentees, like connecting each other. So we use that as our, I'm going to be sick, but like unfair advantage as a way of like, hey, we're powered insights from our like primary network. Is community building like, how else can you like protect your messaging from being lifted, or is there any other ways to do that? Or
I love the community play. We have a community at ForgeX. I know from a again we're not a SaaS or agency, not a SaaS product, but Metadata's demand community does a really good job at this. I think they have over 2,500 members in
yeah,
there, so the insights that they're getting on the daily are incredible. Um, Protecting the messaging, or differentiating, I think, to your point, right, the community, you can have different plays that your competitors aren't doing, and maybe you're doing a community they're not, and you're doing it in a very strong way versus metadata versus one of their competitors who maybe has a Slack community that they tried to copy, and they're just not running it very well. So the different motions that you can use, if you do it in a unique way, and you use it very well, that can be a competitive advantage. But the stealing the messaging piece, you'll always be one step ahead if you're having those conversations with your prospects and your customers. And if you put such a hyper focus on the customer versus, always looking at what your competitors are doing, naturally you're going to be ahead. And that's going to lead to your product being ahead. So if your
yeah,
product's ahead and your product is continuously getting better with this customer obsession, then your competitors will always be behind, and you'll create this group or this almost fan club of customers that just rave about you, and that will permeate through the market.
yeah, I like that a lot. We're going to have to go super quick fire, I guess, at this point. But problem three, we'll just jump straight in. Creating engaging and relevant content for specific key accounts can be pretty resource heavy. So I guess the question, what's like an efficient way marketers can create and deliver kind of compelling content while kind of keeping that personalization while taking like an ABM approach, for example?
So if you're doing, I guess there are a couple different ways to look at this. If you're taking an enterprise ABM approach and you're doing a one-to-one or a one-to-few being 25 accounts or less, that's where you can get really deep in the account specific personalization, where you're actually looking at their 10Ks. You and the sales team are drafting it based off of their conversations as well, and the messaging is complete completely tailored to that specific account. But if you're running more of a growth ABM approach, which is, that tier one, tier two, tier three,
Hmm.
maybe having 50, hundreds, thousands of accounts that fall within the tiers, that's
Hmm.
where the personalization can be more so at, let's say, an industry level. And in terms of the actual personalization, one way we've seen be really effective is almost modularize, or I'm probably butchering that word, but modularized content where you can have these different, personalized tracks that all align to maybe a specific strategic imperative or a message theme. Go get, multiple different messages that could align to this challenge or this imperative. Go get those all pre-approved from your legal team, so that, let's say, in one custom landing page you have 5 different messages for this one industry. And if you have this group of accounts within your growth ABM play, and it's like this message is probably going to resonate better with them, you can just plug that into the modularized content. Or let's say you have another segment and you think, another message will resonate. You already have that piece and you can just plug it into that same piece of content as well. So getting the messages pre-approved from legal and then creating that content that's adaptable, but still has, a set structure. So it's not like you're recreating it every single time.
Yeah, I think you're kind of giving it like a little Botox, I guess, right? A little
Exactly.
reskinning it every time. Getting it through legal is probably the hardest part. Okay, problem four: navigating the long B2B sales cycle. So obviously, sales cycles are getting longer. I was recently speaking to someone this week, actually, about not this week, last week, about that, and they weren't keen on nurture sequences as well, predominantly because it's like the people you're reaching out to have, they're on a buying cadence as well. There's only, like, budgets only unlock, maybe once or twice a year, which was a completely kind of a new thing to me. Well, not new, but like, hey, you're right. There is some element of that, but like, how do you encourage or advise marketers to kind of effectively engage prospects and buyers over a longer sales time? And is there anything that you're seeing work at the moment that helps accelerate those sales cycles?
So, in thinking about the long sales cycle, when you're more so in the beginning,
Hmm.
the way we like to look at this is, one, if you're going after net new accounts, you probably don't have the buying group already mapped. So you're going after the target personas that, historically or through your research, you've identified this is who is most likely to be part of the buying group. So you're going after the target personas at first. And
Hmm.
as you continuously learn more about the account and you go through the sales cycle all the way up into the close, your goal is to partner with the sales team to identify who the members of the actual buying group are. So, at first you're going target personas, then maybe you found, a couple different contacts who are part of that buying group. We found more. And then
Hmm.
when we're towards the end, we have the 12 people who are most important and the ones who are actually going to influence and make the decision as to whether they're going to buy our solution, all mapped. And you're working to engage those contacts, right? Like, once you have the actual buying group, then it's how do we create what's hyper relevant to them and what's going to
Hmm.
engage them and what actually speaks to each of their different buying roles, and putting that into all that you do. Another piece when thinking about the content strategy, we often see, your awareness content, your consideration content, and your decision content. And our hypothesis right now, and we don't have a massive data set to back this. We're working on that, but just from the initial findings, uh, we're only really seeing that there are 3 types of content that you should be thinking about and including within all that you do. So the first one is thought leadership, and
Hmm.
thought leadership running all throughout the sales cycle. It's not just something, we're going to really push this at the awareness stage, and then consideration we're going to have or decision, we're going to have decision content. But thought leadership is engaged with, should add value, should be building trust with these contacts all throughout the sales cycle.
Hmm.
So that being the most important pillar. Then the other two, as data has shown, your buyers are 70% of the way through their buying process when they get in touch with you, when they reach out. So the other two really important pieces of content, one is product education. So how does your product differentiate versus the competitors? And then also investment validation, so this being like an ROI calculator, or actually being able to show, if I make the investment within your product or service, I'm going to
Hmm.
get XYZ back. So having a really strong thought leadership case, and this not just being BS, thought leadership, but actually something that adds value
Yeah.
and shows that you know what you're talking about and you know what is going on within their day to day. And then as they're going throughout the buying cycle, and they probably don't want to talk to you at this point, but they want to see the content, having your product education and your investment validation content openly available for them to be able to go and review this.
Hmm. And what are your thoughts on? I find them really helpful. But those, for example, um, let's use intent data as an example. At the bottom in the footer, they often have like 6 cents versus Bombora, 6 cents versus so and so. Like, what are your thoughts on that? Because, like, in a way, it's kind of, I don't know. There's like, you shouldn't really play down the competition. Yet it's kind of informative. Like, you don't want to give yourself kind of like a bad brand image, but like the ROI calculator, I get the comparing yourself or like the differences between the competition. Are you pro or against those sort of pages?
It depends. I mean, you are just going in, you already know that there's a bias behind what they're going to be showing. I love when they can show it from a third party, or let's say an analyst firm has put together something,
I
of
like
that
that.
capacity, and it's like, from this unbiased source, this is what it tangibly looks like in the field. This is the landscape. Here are the critical capabilities. But I mean, when they put it out themselves, when I look at those, it's like, okay, let me see what you say in your battle card is how you differentiate versus the competitors. And then if or a few of them who I'm evaluating have them, I like to put them next to each other and be like, how are they positioning themselves? But I do like the third party aspect of, the actual comparison piece.
I love the term battle card. That's phenomenal. It kind of makes B2B feel like a game of Pokemon or like
It
Yu-Gi-Oh!
does.
Yeah. Well, also on the other hand, is there such a thing as an unbiased third party? Like, I've been doing a lot of research into the this is another story, but like the pharmaceutical like industry at the moment, and like how things get approved, and I'm like, hold on a second. But anyway, great answer. So, problem five. We're on problem five, right? Yeah. Transitioning from traditional lead gen to an ABM approach can be a challenge. What are the most effective ways to overcome this kind of like internal resistance and embrace that and foster that culture of ABM?
One of the things that's really interesting that we've seen is when you bring on, or you want to pilot an account based strategy, you bring
Mm-hmm.
someone on to lead this pilot. Uh, it's it's really overwhelming for the practitioner, and it can be really overwhelming for the leaders of the organization when you don't position and show the vision of a crawl, walk, run approach. If you try to do too much and show the end state and be like, hey, these are all the things we immediately need, and all of those things map back to the run phase, you're not effectively communicating with your stakeholders clear expectations and realistic expectations. So that's already setting your program up for at a disadvantage.
Mm-hmm.
And also, you don't need to have a ABM dashboard that's fully built out. Your back-end reporting is, beautiful. You've got, all of these different fields within Salesforce that are perfectly clean. Your ABM strategy is running flawlessly, because that's just unrealistic and never happens. So showing, this is what we're doing in our initial crawl phase. Maybe you're still using the MQL approach, but you're infusing a couple different account-based metrics in there as well. And it's not just leadership, but also the sales team and your internal cross-functional partners like your marketing and creative. And so taking that crawl, walk, run approach is really important. And then another one as well is finding your internal champions. So let's say, in the beginning, when you're just starting out your program, choosing who from the sales team is really bought in, and having them evangelize the quick wins and even the long-term wins as they come. So it's not, just you out there pushing all of this stuff, but you actually have someone who's showing impact and is socializing that within the organization. And another one is having executive sponsors. So this being leadership from the marketing team, leadership from the sales team, leadership from customer success if you're going after expansion opportunities, but actually having someone who believes and is bought in to what you're doing and can help with maybe some other cross-functional partners or sales partners who aren't quite understanding what you're trying to do. They can help explain it in another light, or just help socialize what you're doing. So those are a couple different really important ways. Oh, you're muted.
Whew, that was good. Dear Lord, having a coughing fit. The thought leadership piece and getting executive buy-in is crucial, 100%. I wonder if the whole ABM dashboard will tie into your last answer to the final question. I'm curious about that. Let's dive on. So, are you okay for time, by the way?
Perfect.
Yeah. Okay. Awesome.
Yeah.
We're nearly there.
No worries.
So problem 6, before I have another coughing fit and put myself on mute again, was tracking and reporting ROI. So obviously a big one within the ABM space. What are the best practices? And you kind of touched upon it there. You don't need all these fancy dashboards, for example, but what are the best practices and metrics to measure when managing kind of like a multi-channel ABM campaign?
Yep. So the first one is interesting, the ROI perspective, because your CFO is going to be asking this, and so is just about every other C-suite member. And so the way in which we kind of look at that in two lights. So the first one being, we get asked every time QBR season comes around, we get asked probably once every 2 days, do you have any benchmarking data on engagement? And our answer is always no. And nobody does, because there's no standardized data model that everyone is using. So you can't have apples to apples comparisons or even a close engagement benchmark. So the way we look at it is there are two different ways you can benchmark your success. So the first one being, you have your target account list, finding a lookalike target account list. So, here's the one that is receiving ABM treatment, but then also having another one which is receiving no ABM treatment, but the accounts are very similar to what your target account list looks like. So when you map back over, let's say you ran an ABM strategy for 6 months, you can compare, okay, this is what we received in terms of an uplift, or these are the metrics from the accounts that received an ABM treatment versus the ones who did not. So that is a really strong way to prove out the correlation versus causation question that your CFO is probably going to ask. And the quicker way to do this, or almost the easier way, is looking at pre-ABM implementation versus post. So let's take that 6 month example again. What happened after you implemented ABM within the target account list? What happened in that 6 months? And then comparing the 6 months before and looking at, the differences in that light. So personally, my favorite way, and I think the strongest way to do this, is using a control group of target accounts. So the first approach, the lookalike,
Mhm.
but it's also valuable to do both.
That really, really smart. And yeah, you don't have to just switch. It doesn't have to be binary, like go straight over to ABM. You can run them both simultaneously over, like, let's say the period of 6 months. Um, for some reason, my brain didn't work like that. I was just like, yeah, you're either all in on ABM or you're not. But yeah, no, that makes total sense. Um, sorry, you're gonna.
And you know what's crazy too? This is how we've seen the most successful business cases take place for transitioning to a full account based go to market strategy. So they'll run this within a growth ABM approach. And
Yeah.
then once they see the actual tangible impact versus the target account list who wasn't part of the ABM treatment, then it's like, oh, it's a no brainer. We're just going to expand this ABM across all of our accounts, make it our full strategy, and then demand gen just morphs into the growth ABM.
Interesting, yeah. So I guess it has to be a one to few campaign. One to one doesn't really make much sense, but like, yeah, a one to few, like, hey, take 25 accounts versus 25 accounts will go after using traditional methods. Because that's like the closest comparison, right? A one to one isn't, well, yeah, anything above 25 accounts, I'm kind of in agreement with you. Well, for me, I don't believe is ABM. I think it's definitely more demand gen. That's just my humble opinion, but what do I know?
But one to one is tricky because if you're doing an actual one to one, I
Yeah.
mean, the difference between your one to one versus an account that's not realizing one to one is probably going to be really significant.
Yeah. And the outcomes are completely different as well. What we're going for. Right, we made it. So the final question was from our previous guest, Karina Owens, and she asked, "What in ABM should you contract, fire, and scale?"
Okay. I hope I got these answers in Karina. I hope I got these answers in the way you were thinking of this question. So the contract would be enterprise ABM, meaning one to one or one to few 25 accounts or less, and bringing this on only if you have a high enough ACV where it makes sense. So you wouldn't run a one to one strategy if your ACV is only 40, 35K. That would make absolutely no sense. But this would be, 250K, million, multi-million, and in some cases we've even seen $1 billion deals. That's where running a one-to-one enterprise ABM strategy actually makes sense, and you should consider it. Fire, trying to do one to one and one to many. One to one being, again, that enterprise ABM pursuit, and one to many being a growth ABM. And firing this if you are a solo practitioner. It makes absolutely no sense to try and cover 1,000 accounts in a tiered growth ABM
Mhm.
approach and then add on 5, 8, 10 one-to-one campaigns as well. You're going to be completely uh, you'll be completely overwhelmed. You won't have the resources to actually do it. You won't be able to run either to the degree that they should because you'll be so bandwidth and resource constraint. And so don't do that. Pick either enterprise ABM or growth ABM and really rock with that and give it the love that it deserves. And then scale growth ABM. We see this as the future of what every B2B marketing organization is going to be eventually running. When you look at the convergence of ABM and lead generation, demand generation, growth ABM is where everyone is going. And so that's where we see the future. And those are my contract fire scale. Fire scale.
No, they're solid, solid answers. Growth ABM is where it's at. We actually have a few like kind of partnerships with agencies which solely specialize in kind of that growth ABM stage, not one to one, because like you've just said, the ROI is just proven to be better over time in getting people through the door. Right. That is fantastic. We made it. Davis, do you have a question for our next guest?
I do. How do you see the convergence of demand gen and ABM taking place?
Oh my. I might ask, I might ask that to a few people because you're going to get, I think, a few different answers to that question, which isn't a bad thing. But that's a strong, strong question. Right, fantastic. Thank you so much for joining. Sorry for asking so many follow-on questions, but yeah, I'll speak to you soon, Davis.
This is great. Thanks so much for having me on, Sam.